Okay. Welcome everybody back for our May 31st work session. There's one item on the agenda, the environmental health and septic permits work session. Commission, Randy and I talked briefly. I want to make sure you're in agreement with our agenda plan here. I think we would allow staff to present first, have a back and forth on initial questions, then open it up for public comment, take those. If there's questions we want to ask, and then allow staff time to respond to those. Does that sound appropriate? Yeah. And Randy, do you have anything you want to report specifically, or you want to let staff do it?
This is really for staff, but what I had explained to staff was this is their opportunity, Darcy's opportunity, to kind of explain what she does, what the regulations we have in place, how that's tied to the state comparison, and really as an education for the commission and public of what she does and why she does that.
Okay. Thank you for that. Health Department staff, you're free to present.
Hi, I'm Darcy with the Environmental Health Services at the Health Department. Thank you for having me today or this afternoon. No, we're still morning, right? Okay, we're still here in the morning to go over environmental health, and I was specifically asked to do education on wastewater in the county, that part of the code, as you have already been given a copy of the sanitation code and the state's code. You can see there's other components, but right now I was just told to talk about wastewater. And so, as you've already been given, the environmental health section was started in the 1980s, and the first code was adopted in 1988. Then it was amended in 1991 and 1994. The current code that you have a copy of was adopted in 2003. As revisions are made to codes, you have to remember that KDHE has to approve your revisions. So it has to be within their regulations or an improvement of their current regulations that they have at the time. It also has to be something that actually works with your code. We'll get more into, works with your county. We'll get more into that here in a little bit. Why is wastewater so unique in Reno County? It's very unique in this county. You can ask contractors, you can ask realtors, you can ask property owners. We have some unique features. You can ask other counties. We just recently had a discussion with some other counties, and they all identified that Reno County has some unique geological differences compared to what they have in their counties. We have some sandy locations with sandy soil. We have locations with high groundwater. We have locations with shale. We have locations with clay. And we're also seeing modeling. And when I refer to the word modeling, I'm not talking about somebody posing for pictures. I'm talking about modeling, redox modeling, specifically in the soil. And what that is, and it's spelled MOTTLING, modeling, that's where we can see where the water table has come up. It's risen, it's settled, and it's gone back down. So we have some unique features within that. It can change rather drastically on site. I've had administration out on site. You can talk to contractors about this as well, even property owners, that even within 20, 30 feet, 50 feet, features change within the soil rather quickly. And those features need to be identified the best that we can so that the contractor can provide a good bid to the homeowner, or the homeowner can know what's going to be installed or what's the best to be installed. If you've read through the codes, you're going to also understand that when we discover these restrictive features such as clay, modeling, water, shell, the code's required to be 4 foot above those. It's very common in this county to run into restrictive features within 5 feet. We've had restrictive features within 7 inches on some sites, and it makes it very difficult to get a wastewater system in. You can also see and think about just your own home site and other home sites. Every site's unique. Your home and your layout is different than Mr. Hurst's layout. It's completely different. And so we have to get the best location determined and making sure that we meet code requirements, and also keeping the homeowner educated and involved throughout the entire permit process is very important to county staff. So why do we do this? What's the big deal? Why do we care? We care a lot because if you think about what is in wastewater, there's a lot of contaminants. People don't like to talk about what's in wastewater. It's not a very popular topic, and it's not something that most people even want to even talk about, but we're going to talk about what's in it. So if you think about what goes down a drain, everybody wants the water to come on and everybody wants it to go down the drain and go away. But we never really think about where it goes next. Where is it ending up? What's happening? And so let's think about, there are bacteria, there are viruses, your own body carries some bacteria, you can carry your own illness that as you excrete and you go to the restroom, it then goes down your drain, then it goes, where does it go next? So out in the county, it goes to a septic tank or it goes to a possible lagoon, and then it goes out into a lateral field. So then we've already talked about what's going on with the soil. So it's important to think about where it's leaching out into the lateral field and hitting the soil. Are we running into any of these restrictive features that would impede treatment? We don't want to impede treatment. Nitrates are a big issue with wastewater. Very big issue. Nitrates have an influence on livestock. They have an influence on pregnant women. They have an influence for infants 6 months and under. You get them at certain levels and they can be detrimental and they can kill livestock rather quickly. It's a very big pollution source, and a septic tank and what leaves your home is noted to be known for high nitrates. So, and then the nitrates, as it leaves that wastewater system, it goes back into the soil. You want it to have good treatment before it hits the groundwater again. If you also think about groundwater, you turn on your faucet, where does your water come from? Even if you live in the city, some of their wells are located out in the county. So everybody in this county drinks groundwater. Nobody here is drinking surface water. Even rural residents have a well that's drilled. So it's very important to protect that well. It's very important to make sure that the wastewater system is in a proper place, because we don't want to have nitrates. We're going to have nitrates, but can we reduce them and can we protect a well? If you can remember that nitrates can travel 287 feet per year through the ground as it maneuvers. There's geological formations under the ground and soils and fractured shale and sands and clay lenses. If you can remember that the water is moving underneath the ground, it is not stagnant, then you understand even more why we got to make sure these septic systems are in a good location and a great place. Staff's goal when they go out on sites is to make sure that what's being proposed, will it meet the county setbacks and will it meet the state setback? The state has a code. You have a copy of the state's code already, Bulletin 4-2. And the county has their own code as well. So we have to go out on site and make sure that what's being proposed or what people are wanting to do, will it meet code? That's our main goal. We just want to make sure, is it going to meet code and is the sewage going to get properly treated? It's very important to make sure that those mesh so we can protect that well. We all want to have safe drinking water. All of us are having water right now. So it's very important to make sure that we get a good location. We're protecting the groundwater because we are all consuming it. Every walk of life, livestock, pets, humans, we're all consuming the water in this county. So I can't stress to you enough why I think it's a good thing what we do. So as we go out on sites, we're going to talk a little bit about processes in just a second. I also provided you 2 maps One was from the KCC, and one was from the Aquasbeds. The KCC map that you have also looked at and been presented is a very important map. It shows the sensitivity areas of Reno County. And if you look at that, when see where Reno County is, and we're highlighted in yellow, it's very obvious that most of our county is pretty sensitive. You can see it right down there. The blue identified in the square is actually Cheney Lake. So you can see on the side that there's two scales that are reflecting the sensitivity of the area. It's very sensitive. But if you also think about, we have sandy soils and high groundwater, how important it is to protect it. So this is one state agency that recognizes, and you can see by the map, that we are in a sensitive area. Almost the entire county is. It's very important that you understand that concept. So if you think about, as wastewater then leaves a septic system or a lateral field, where is it located? Where are you located? Are you in a sensitive groundwater area? More than likely you are. And so it's important that we get proper treatment before it goes back to the groundwater. The next map that you were also given, thank you, I received this from the Aquasbeds, and it's a little blurry, but it is from 2002. It is still very much accurate. This also reflects the area of the Aquasbeds. And there are two aquifers in this county. There's also the Ogallala, which is over in a very small corner of western Reno County. But this map right here is of the Aquasbeds, and it is directly under us, and you can see that it serves quite a bit, it's under quite a bit of the county. So if you basically can think about a very large body of water directly under us right now, and we all secure water from it, especially deeper wells, larger city wells. But the color variations reflect the potential of pollution sources, and they have already looked at soils on this, they've looked to depth, they're measuring recharge rates as well. So you can see by this map, red is very sensitive, like there can be some issues. Yellow, it was orange and then yellow and then on up to green. Most of the county, as you can tell, has the potential of pollution based off of soils, depth, and recharging. So these are very important issues that we have to always consider in mind when we're looking at the treatment of wastewater. It's not very obvious to the homeowner, these maps or what's going on their site. They may not understand what's going on, but there is a reason why we do what we do. And these two maps are definitely showing you why it's so important that we need to protect groundwater, especially in this county. We had conversations last week with some of the surrounding counties, and they don't have near these sensitive groundwater areas as we do. They're minor. You can see as you a little bit up in McPherson County, they're minor. As you scoot over into Sedgwick County over there to the east, it's a minor area. So you have to keep those in mind as we continue to go on through. As we know, drinking water, it can have bacteria in it that is left from your sewage system if you don't get a good separation distance. So why do we care about bacteria in water? It causes illness. It makes people sick. Nitrates, we've also talked about that it can also cause problems for humans and pets. Phosphorus is also something that can leave your waste. Phosphorus is also found in detergents as well, so everybody here uses some type of detergent, whether it's at your kitchen sink or your washing machine. So phosphorus can cause diarrhea. At some point, if you think about how water flows and moves throughout the county, some groundwater will interact, not all of it, some will interact with surface waters. And if that groundwater is contaminated with nitrates and phosphorus, surface waters can then become contaminated. You will have algae blooms. Well, what do you care about algae blooms? You should care a lot about algae blooms because there is cyanobacteria that is prevalent in algae blooms. It can make livestock sick, pets, and humans. You don't want these algae blooms. It also suffocates out some of the aquatic life that's needed in the surface waters. So keep that in mind as well as we continue to talk. Just think about the geology around you and what's going on below you. We're also learning that as medicine leaves bodies, you can ask contractors. I've ran in this with a few contractors as well. Radiation and chemo and other medicines that leave the bodies can have a direct influence on a wastewater system. So as it goes down the drain and it enters the septic tank, there are biological functions that are occurring within the tank to break down the waste. It's not like it's just sitting there. And so sometimes if somebody has some excrement and it is full of medicines, it can alter some chemistries. And you can see some dead systems. And they just literally, they just kind of kill off and die. And you have to either re-inoculate it or hope for the best that it kind of comes back on its own. So medicines, we're also seeing an influence as well on some wastewater systems. I've worked a couple of sites with contractors, or they'll call in and report it that they think that the system's been killed and somebody might be taking some medicines that offset it. The average wastewater system, according to the EPA manual, I'm going to refer a lot to federal publications and state publications. The EPA manual recognizes that 40 milligrams per liter of nitrates is what the average effluent or the waste that comes out of a system. 40 milligrams per liter is very deadly to livestock. It can, and humans. It can also cause reproductive issues as well. So we already know that that's a known as an average to come out of a home. So treatment is vital once we start leaving, and protecting wells is very much important. So it's very important that we keep that in mind, and also that we make sure that we have good treatment as it goes on through. The county does have a code requirement that anything less than 3 acres is required to have an aerobic treatment system. What that does is we have subdivisions, older subdivisions in this county that are on small lots. And when you have a half acre and you have a wastewater system and a well, and a half acre and a wastewater system and a well, and you think about how nitrates move and what's leaving the system, sometimes the water quality can be compromised. I'll just put it to you that way. And so it's very important to think about what is the best way to handle some of these smaller subdivisions or these smaller lots when people are just kind of side by side, there's not a lot of spacing. Aerobic treatment provides a great way to treat nitrates in water. And whenever, I'll break it down to you very simply, whenever you aerate a system and you can get it to break down, then nitrates are reduced. The nitrates can be reduced to drinking water standards or better, which is fabulous. And Reno County has a great standard that, and is similar to one other county standard, and it's similar to just a federal standard as well, that we want the newer systems to accomplish this drinking water standard of 10 milligrams per liter. So 10 is what is commonly enforced on cities and anybody that's a public water supply. So if you think about that your sewage is leaving your tank at 10 milligrams per liter before it goes back to the groundwater, you are accommodating a drinking water quality standard. You're help meeting that standard. Is very important. And so we have some great aerobic tanks that are sold in this county that accomplish that and do a nice job of really getting that done. They are expensive. Yes, they do cost more to do. But what we are seeing is that if they're maintained and the contractors maintain and the property owners are educated about maintenance, that effluent means it's the stuff leaving the system. That effluent, instead of being 40 at a deadly level, is now at a drinking water level. Would I drink it? No. Does it still need further treatment in the soil? Yes. But it's at a better quality before it's actually back to the groundwater and intaked by somebody's neighboring well. Any questions so far? None. Okay. Very good.
What makes McPherson a minor area, water area, since they're also sitting right up on top of the aquifer?
Are you referring to this map right here behind you?
Yeah.
That one right there. So that one, if you would look at that, there is like 8 factors, I believe, into what determined that, and that was created by the Equus bed. So I am not the I'm not the creator of the map and the geologist of the map by any means, but I believe their saturation thickness and their soils are heavier than ours. We just had a meeting and McPherson was involved, and their soils are much heavier, just to simplify that for you, much thicker, heavier soils than what we encounter. That movement. It slows it down. If you think about it, we're kind of sandy and
intake
fast.
water inches per hour or inches per day is less.
Yes, like a
Is that what
perk
you're saying?
rate. Yes, right. So yeah, we just had a meeting with them in some other counties, and that was one thing noticeably different that she had mentioned was their
Parts of Reno
soils.
County has very heavy clay.
Yes, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. We run into some heavy clays, but a lot of sand, a lot of looser soils too. The current code that was approved by the Board of County Commission in 2003 has a heightened attention for proper sewage treatment and a heightened attention to protecting the groundwater. Chapter 3 of that sanitation code is definitely about protection of the groundwater and making sure that we have really good treatment and identifying that on small lots that it's very good to have nitrates reduced. It's also geared to keep all parties involved, and it does meet the current state regulations. The sanitation code has to meet the state regulations. So the counties have the right to adopt codes to meet and exceed the current state reg. And so the current state regulation that was provided to you was Bulletin 4-2 from 1997. And if you compare it with our code, we definitely meet the minimums, and then we've exceeded them. And that was what was passed by the board in 2003. Talking about the code a little bit more, it has sections in it that you've probably already went through about permitting wastewater systems, permitting wells, licensing of contractors, licensing of homeowners to actually install their own systems if they would like to as well. We also license pump trucks that pump out septic tanks. We also look at their disposal plans, and we are one of the few counties that provide an actual public water supply protection in our codes, which means that we are actually providing to those cities a protected area out around their well that are serving thousands of other people out in the county. Few counties have that in their code, but Reno County does have that. So we are also working with our city partners and making sure that we're providing protection for their wells also.
So that's not a state regulation?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. The city was also involved in the creation of the 2003 code as well. They had some representatives on there. So, of course, you know, we would want to partner with them and do protection of their wells, too. And then there's also a section on enforcement. So, the current process right now is evolving routinely. We're trying to also make it become more efficient. So let's talk about a wastewater permit process. Right now, the application comes in. The applications are online. So everything that I'm telling you or showing you, except for the maps, which I can get those online, is available online for anybody to apply for a wastewater application at any time. The application is completed, they submit their permit fee, we look at our schedules, and we set up a site evaluation and soil profile. Soil profiles can be completed by county staff, or the contractor or homeowner has the right to hire an engineer to complete the soil profile, or a soil scientist, or you can have a contractor who has had his work signed off by an engineer, and it actually works out quite nicely. It helps expedite the process a little bit more. So then we meet out there for a site evaluation and soil profile. And soil profiles can be quite challenging. I think I've provided you some odd little pictures of things that we look at. But you have to keep in mind that county staff are just looking to meet the bare bone minimums. That's all we're wanting to make sure that we get done, is that are they meeting setbacks? of the sanitation code of what they're wanting to do, and is the profile pit reflecting any restrictive features or issues that might be detrimental to the system. We want the system to work, right? We don't want these being influenced by groundwater. We want to get good treatment before it hits back to the ground. So that's what we're there for, is to make sure that that is met. We also go a little bit further and beyond. We provide pictures of the sites and what's happening, and we GPS the site as well. So at the end, there is a packet that is sent to the owner and the contractor, and usually the contractors work from those bids, or work from that packet to get their bids. Or a homeowner may decide that they want to install their own wastewater system and save some money, which they have every right to do, and we work with them and educate them about the type of system. So that packet is beneficial for everybody involved. It gives a lot of good information about any restrictive features or waivers or issues that might be needed are automatically verbalized, and we consult with the contractor on site to make sure we're all on the same page. Measurements are taken. So a lot of those discussions occur right there on the very first site. We try to get as much discovered as possible and have an agreement or an idea of what everybody's thinking when we leave. We want the property owner there on that site. We want their input, and we try to figure out what also they want as well, if we can accommodate it. There's a reason why we have setbacks. Land can be split. People can build next door. Somebody wants to drill a well next door on a neighboring property. So there are reasons why the county has setbacks to stay away from property lines and also wells. You already know why. We've talked about nutrients and nitrates and why is it important to have these setbacks. So that's what the initial goal is for the first site, to be looking at that, gathering all that information. Then from there, we submit all that information to the property owner or whoever else needs to be involved, and then we wait for a construction plan to be submitted by the contractor. Sometimes we run into delays. There could be floodplain on the property. There might be not a building permit. We may not even have an address yet. So we might be waiting on some of these finer little items to come in. Property owners switch contractors. We see it routinely. They decide they want to go with somebody else. That's okay. So at this point, we're waiting for a construction plan. Sometimes we can get a construction plan on site. It's great when that happens. Things go a lot faster. And we don't mind that either. If a contractor has got everything ready to go and he wants to submit his plans on site, that is perfect. We like that just as well. We will work with that too. But typically we see that they take the packet and then they want to be able to get bids from that. So just every contractor is a little bit different on that, but we are flexible in trying to work with them the best we can and the property owner to get a system that will provide proper treatment and also meet the county setbacks. So as we start, the county has worked on doing standardized emails. We have been working with doing standardized emails and clear communication with our clients since 2019. Started doing a little bit more of that, so staff wouldn't say the incorrect information. And the information is sent in the packet to the homeowner and to the contractor on a standardized email that includes everything that they could need to make a decision. We're constantly referring them to the website, and we want clients to work with their contractor to make sure that they understand what's going on. We've also going to start adding what happens is there is a tendency for the public to think that staff are dictating the system that's being installed, which is inaccurate. Staff have a great ability of reciting regulations, so then it kind of appears as their personal opinion, and it is not their personal opinion. We cannot provide our personal opinion. We can only make sure that the site meets the bare minimums and the system is installed correctly. So we have started really working on standardized responses and standardized information that is going out to the public. We are letting everybody know that we don't get to pick the system. Like, we don't get to pick if it's a chambered field. We don't get to pick if it's pipe and gravel. The staff may not do that. They cannot pick those systems at all. That is something that we do for wells and mortgage inspections and other environmental inspections that we do. So we've been working really hard to make sure that people understand it is not our personal opinion on site. So we are just following the bare bone minimums to get them through. So the information then is given to the contractor and the homeowner. The contractor submits a plan for us to review. The plan is reviewed to make sure that it meets the minimums, right? We have to make sure it meets their square footage requirements. You already have a copy of Bulletin 4-2, page 11. That's how you determine the square footage of a system. So we run the calculations, make sure the calculations are correct. Is the orientation of the field correct? Is the contractor meeting the distances that we talked about on site? If he's meeting all this, that's great. We send it to the property owner for approval. Owner verification is very important to us. We want property owners to know what type of system they're getting, where it's going, and any maintenance requirements that's going to be in the future. And so once we receive that construction plan, the contractor is included in the email to the property owner. We keep everybody involved, and that way they know how much fill is going to be brought in, how much pipes are you going to have sticking out of your yard, am I going to have a pump? Property owners want to know this because after the contractor and myself leave, they have to live with it. They have to maintain it. So right now, once the property owner agrees with the construction plan and they're in agreement that, yes, this is where I want my system to be, I understand what's going on, we issue a permit. Then we are notified by the contractor of when that system will be installed. The contractor will email us, or most of them call in. It just depends on the type of the system. And we go out there for an inspection. We photograph it, we GPS it, and then a final packet goes out to the property owner. County always retains records, so in case there is something that the applicant might need in the future, then we would also have that. So the packets are quite a big at the end because it's everything encompassing. We want you to have everything in your hands so you understand what was all used in your permit process. And we keep the property owner and contractor informed as we go, or if we're running into any issues. Floodplain can be a big issue for us. A very big issue out in the county. The state has criteria. The local has criteria as well. We work very closely with Mark at Planning and Zoning, as you know, to make sure these systems are put in the right location. That can be a delay. That can be a delay that none of us really like, but we all have to go through it. We have to get through the floodplain and make sure that it can go in or it can't go in. Building permits. You know, the zoning permits out in the county, some of those can be a little bit of a delay, or maybe there's a case that's pending. And so we keep everybody informed about that. Maybe there needs to be a lot split done. Not everybody wants a large acreage out in the county. Some people want smaller acreage. So we wait for those cases to go through as well out in the county. So delays happen throughout the permitting process. Sometimes if we don't have enough room on a site and somebody wants to do an easement where they can encompass a larger area to make sure they hit those setbacks. Very popular to do on the edge of farm ground with just a small residential home. Very popular easements that we see a lot. Helps out everybody in the long run. And so those can take some time to get drawn up. I review those with legal. Patrick works very closely with me on those throughout the entire time. Some sites are just complicated. Like there are just complications. It's tiny, it's small, it's now that we want to do a driveway, oh now we want to do a shop over here. So sites are just very unique. And when things start getting a little challenging, administration is automatically involved in the process. They help me with cases, they review emails, any complaints about staff performance or fees or what's going on, or somebody feels like that the process isn't working for them, those are automatically given for administration for input and review every time.
Hey, Darcy.
Yes.
I don't know how much longer you have, but we could give you some feedback just to guide you in where.
You tell me.
Well, are you about done?
I was just going to go into some staff challenges and misconceptions.
Sure. And then we might ask some questions for
Absolutely, yeah. So staff challenges that we've had. We are technically a department, the EH side is 4. We need 4 people to get it going well. We've been operating with 2 or 3 for about a year and a half, and it has been a struggle. We had limited to no overtime, except for in the past maybe 2 months. We finally got a little bit of overtime, and then it was cut back again. We recently got fully staffed, with just in a few weeks ago, so we are super pleased about that. Reno County was in a building splurge. I mean, things were going crazy. As everybody knows, building has been going well the past few years. And we could barely keep up, if not keep up at all. We were very much struggling on trying to keep up. There were delays on getting to sites. I have new staff. It takes time. But now that we're fully staffed and we're getting people trained, things are good. I could do a pit this afternoon if somebody wanted to. Our schedule is, that open, and of course our demand is not there. So our staffing and our calendar times are definitely a reflection of what contractors are seeing or realtors are seeing. So it was very challenging. The county does not require mortgage inspection on the transfer of sales, and we have a disclaimer in our email that goes out that say you don't have to hire the county to do this. You can hire a contractor or a well driller if you want to. And honestly, that kind of helped cut back a little bit. A lot of contractors took over that service, which is great for them, and they did very well. So, but the county does not have that requirement. It's a common misconception that people think a lot. So staffing has been tricky, I would say, for about the past 2 years, and but things are getting better in that department. Misconceptions. Again, we've kind of talked about this as staff. People think that just because we can recite the code, it's our personal decision. It's not. You already know that complaints are handled through administration. They are very much involved in our casework every day. Links of just waiting for things to kind of line up together, again, is not just county staff. There's just a lot of issues that go into a property development. If you've ever built out in the county, there's just a lot of little things that we got to take a look at. What I'd like to close out with is that numbers have been increasing in the county. I've been reporting increased numbers and increased work by county staff in the past 3 years. And it has been a struggle for us. We have people on waiting list, and our calendars are shared and open from Health Department administration to county administration have looked at our calendars and know that things are busy. And so we work as the best and the hardest as we can to try to get caught up. So there are other parts of the code that I wish we could go over during this meeting, but I know I'm only here to talk about wastewater, and I'm open right now to any questions that you guys would have or thoughts.
Mr. Stillers?
I have no questions.
First.
One of those questions I had was, if you're dealing in clay to where there's a limited amount of percolation that you can get, rather than go to a different system, can you allow another 6 inches or a foot more of I guess I'd call it containment or rock or so forth, rather than go to a different system and a lateral system?
Yeah. So clay can be a limiting feature. There's no doubt. It depends on the lot size in the room and what people want to do.
Let's just say you got plenty of room.
Okay. You got plenty of room, and the clay is the problem. And let's say you encounter clay at 2 foot down. Fair enough? Does that work along what you're thinking?
Maybe
Okay.
It goes to 6 foot.
Okay, yeah. So let's say we encounter restrictive clay. And that means it's restrictive, like it's not going to penetrate, the effluent's not going to go through it very well. You encounter restrictive clay at 2 foot. On a traditional system, so I'm talking just regular septic tank and lateral, okay? You would then be required to meet the state code and the county code, and you'd have to have a 2-foot buildup. So,
In other words, 2 foot underneath the
2
lateral.
foot underneath the lateral, and then, so it's gonna get pretty tall, right? You're gonna have a lifted system.
Well, why don't you just dig down further
Right, so
and give
you,
you more space to contain that water to give it time enough to filtrate through?
so when you,
That's what I'm asking.
Right, yeah,
Maybe I shouldn't even be at
that's okay.
personally, but
You'd have to meet those setbacks. We do have where people have put in aerobic tanks, and because the effluent is so much better and the soil absorbs the effluent so much better, that we allow them to get closer to that restrictive feature is with some dosing. If the clay is at 2 foot, so that's one example. I actually gave you 2 examples. If the clay is at 2 foot, and let's say it continues on for 6 or 10 feet, then, you know, if you had tons of room, honestly, a lagoon might be something to think about, and probably one of the most economical. But it's, some people don't want lagoons, some people do. So we have to kind of figure out, like, what do they want to do, and are they just meeting the minimums in their design? Did I muddy the waters there for you, or did I clear them?
well, you added some more things, but
Okay.
and maybe I can talk to you about that later.
Okay.
Why are we more restrictive than KDHE in some areas?
Why are we more restrictive, than KDHE? So again, we have like less than 3 acres, we have the aerobic treatment system requirement, an enhanced treatment system requirement. That you are not going to find in KDHE's code. You're going to find it in Reno County's code. You're going to also find it in quite a few other surrounding counties' codes. And so again, it's all about...
Is that the only more restrictive than the state?
No. Our setbacks are more restrictive as well from distances. So KDHE wants a 50-foot setback from a wastewater system to a well. Reno County wants 100. Not always can that be met, but that is, especially if you have an existing lot, like what are we gonna do on some of these small lots? And we provide waivers to,
You do provide.
Oh, absolutely, yes, yeah. So we work with existing clients to try to make sure that those setbacks can be met, and if they can't, we do waivers. Our goal on the waivers, though, is always to protect that well and try to maximize it the best we can. If you get down to 50 feet to a well, let's say somebody needs 45 feet, the county cannot provide that waiver. That has to go to the state.
And that brings back to what we discussed several years ago. Can you give waivers for, say, the only place you can put this within 20 feet of trees?
Yes.
We can provide a waiver that says, we recommend this, but you can do this.
Right, yeah, yes, absolutely, yeah. And we've had some recently that we've done that where it's just, that's the only place that really can kind of fit.
Do you have everybody dig a hole on a piece of property, even when water from a well next to it is 20 or 30 feet or 40 feet to meet the water table?
So a soil profile is needed on every visit. However, if they've already done one in the past from 2003, we might have one on file and we want to just go right next to it, there's no need to dig another soil profile pit. We're just going to go right next to it, and we waive that part of the code. But new stuff where we don't have that soil history on file, we need to see what's going on, and it is a code requirement.
And I noticed in here in your report that you do use the soil map, Reno County soil.
We look at the soil map. We look at it. However, if you look at some of the restrictive features like water bearing layers of soil, it gives you such a broad range. So we can actually nail that down within an inch on a soil profile, which is huge because then they know how much fill to bring in or how much, if they need to do a lift station or not. So the soil map says this is what you should encounter when you go on site, and then we can actually fine tune it, or the contractor can fine tune it when he does the profile pit.
And can you use any kind of dirt for a mound system?
No, sir. So you do not want to use a mound, you don't want to use fill that has clay in it, because what would be the point? Yeah, you would be restrictive. A sandy loam is the most ideal fill that you can find. to fill up before you make the laterals. That's the
soils
ideal.
in Reno County, for the most part.
Yes.
What soils are restrictive to use for a cover amount outside of clay?
Clay is the biggest restrictive one that we've run into.
You could use Farnham or Schellenberger or any of those.
As long as it's a nice sandy loam, you could probably use it. People will bring us in a sample and say, I have found this, or I dug this spot up on my property. Can we use this for fill? And we'll evaluate it for you. It's not a problem.
If you know it's by the soil map, you can pretty well tell what the soil, what the topsoil is.
You should be able to, as long as it hasn't been altered on site. That's what we run
Covered
into.
over or something.
Yes,
with
right,
fill
exactly.
from basement or something like that. But outside of that, any soil that's normally on topsoil, except maybe a slick spot or something like
Right.
that, right?
Right, yeah. And then you wouldn't want to use fill from ponds. The soil from a pond is actually kind of toxic, and you just don't want to use the fill from a pond.
But outside of that, any topsoil.
Most
I
of
don't
it.
consider a pond dirt topsoil.
Well, what we have a tendency is it gets sandy, right? People are like, oh, it's nice and sandy, but it's actually very toxic, and it's not really good and supportive for actually filtering is quite as well. So prefer you not to do that one, but we would be more than happy to look at fill. And contractors will even bring samples of fill in and say, I want to use this, what are your thoughts? And we'll work it up for them so they know before they buy a bunch of it and determine it. Absolutely, yeah.
Silt loam is fine, okay. Is there any way we can, you've looked at this and I'm sure, and most of that's the time taken to get a permit. There's too many variables in there to look at. If you do this, this, and this in this time frame, we'll be able to speed it up. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right.
Okay, I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. I had some similar questions. What's the average turnaround time for a septic system application?
Average is so variable.
What's the shortest?
I've done them same day.
What's the longest?
Well, if I'm waiting for an address or I'm waiting for floodplain, do you have the same contractor? Did you continue building your home? I mean, I've done evaluations and we're still waiting for the person to build their home, or are they going to continue? So some of those cases can be open for years, depending on construction and what's going on individually. As soon as we get a plan, though, Daniel, we try to evaluate it as quickly as we can and get it a permit issued. I have even met contractors on site and they've adjusted their plan on site, and I've issued permits right there on site.
So on average, when you have a complete application?
And everything's going well, and we have...
The last 2 years or last
Okay,
year.
sure. I would say once we receive the plan, and I would say 1 to 2 days, once we received a completed plan. It's legible and we can actually read it, and everything's going good on it. Owner approval, all that good stuff.
Would it be fair to say, I think this is one of the issues that I've been provided
Sure.
complaints on. And
Sure.
is it fair to say what an applicant perceives as a delay is what you would perceive as an incomplete application?
We have started the process with incomplete applications and had them amended on site.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and make the appointment and try to get on out there to them, and then, if they can fix it before we get there, we can have them amended on site. Typically what we see on incomplete applications is somebody didn't put in the number of bedrooms. Well, if you look in Bulletin 4-2, that's a sizing criteria. We need that. Or if we can capture somebody's email on site or something like that, we will try to get going and get those sites going.
Generally, would you say you complete a completed application in a couple weeks? From start to finish, or
Okay, so
what's the average?
Right, so I think what you're seeing is once we receive the application and fees, Are you saying then when do we get to the site or?
Well, so I want to put in a septic system.
Sure.
How long am I going to have to wait if I have all the information you need? Generally, like I'm going to have something that I don't have that you need.
So, you submit your application and your fees. We can, right now, with things are kind of chilling out because of the economy, not super fast. But I would say generally we could get out there within a week now. And then if your contractor has everything ready to go on site and does a plan, we can issue a permit then. Or the next day, if he has a waiver, I have to meet with administration for waivers. I don't do waivers. That's done through admin. So that's at 1 to 2 day right there. So, and then for them to install it, that's up to the contractor. I don't know about his schedules.
Generally, how many pages is an application?
1.
And that includes all of the supporting documentation.
An application is 1 page.
So there's not a lot of paperwork.
No.
Okay.
There's more paperwork by staff than the public.
Have we received or identified groundwater contamination associated with septic systems in the county?
Yes, we've received that. I included in your packet, your resource packet, KDHE just did a groundwater study. It's in 2019. It was in your packet that reflects on-site wastewater systems is item number 3 as far as causing groundwater contamination or a nutrient contamination in the county. Yes.
What page was that?
You just read it's it was in your packet. Let me get that for you. It's a KDHE non-point source. It was this one right here. The state identifies it as wastewater being a contamination source along I only just did the front page for my packet, but for you should have had this one, and it also lists a chart in here. Right here, these are the sources of contaminants. This is the chart, and it shows on-site's right there, wastewater. It may not say septic systems. That might be the wording that you're missing, but it's in there. On-site wastewater is definitely there and recognized.
This is the
My
bulletin.
previous work as a real estate broker, I've run into one small community that had lots and lots of septic tanks forever and ever, and they added a lagoon system.
Yes.
Because in order to sell that property there, we had to install an RO system,
Right.
just from my practice.
Yeah. They're definitely a source of pollution. There's something that needs to be monitored.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm asking about specific incidents that have been reported in the county.
Keep going. Is this the correct bulletin? It's just down more, right, Darcy? Is this the correct one, or is this a different one?
He's in the correct one,
Yeah,
yes.
keep going.
What page is it?
This is on page 30. It lists it.
There you go. I was going to say, I thought you were getting close.
There you
right
go.
there.
So it shows you your sources of pollution. And number 3, on-site wastewater, and you can see bacteria, biological oxygen demand, nitrogen, and phosphorus are definitely identified as sources that come from wastewater systems.
But do we have reported incidents where it's like, yeah, that was a septic system that contaminated that water source?
So point sourcing can be difficult to do.
Do we have any?
I could think of some examples where a small rural school was on a wastewater system that was a septic system and went to a lagoon, and they're slowly seeing water quality improvement. So yes, I have had a gentleman over in the Bloomville area who had soap water coming up in his well.
Yeah.
So yes, it's there. I feel pretty bad for him.
Do we have, how are waivers processed? Like what?
Sure. So waivers, we collect the information on site. They know immediately right there on site if they're going to need to submit a waiver or not. Waivers can be submitted by the contractor or the property owner. The form is pretty much pre-filled out for them. They just check their box, write in the distances that they need. Do I need, instead of it being 100 feet, I need 85 feet. Then those are given to the assistant director. Megan, she is here, and then she also reviews the file. She looks at the photographs, the aerials, what staff had found on site, and then that's how the waiver is processed. If it's approved, which most generally they are, then they are notified that it's approved and we're good to go. Let's get a permit and get this system going. But yeah, it's usually maybe an additional day or two delay because I got to get coordinated with Megan's schedule. I don't do waivers.
Okay. I've got one other question. Are you familiar with a process called the green machine?
Green machine. No, please go ahead.
It's something I want to see if that's
Okay.
would be approved and how much, because I was on a food processing plant in Wisconsin that was using this process. Anaerobic system to an aerobic system.
Yeah.
Being able to dump all of their finished product out in the creek. So,
Sure.
okay.
Okay, I think we'll move on if you're done. Or
I am done. I'm just for any questions that you have or anything.
Yeah,
You guys good?
I think we want to hear from the public. There's a
Okay,
couple
sure.
people, that are on the agenda. Marcia, did you want to go
Sure.
first? You just, for the record, just state your name, address, and
So I'm Marcia McConnell, 3616 East 43rd here in Hutchinson. And I appreciate Darcy's overview. And I appreciate Darcy. We've always had a good working relationship.
Yes, we have.
Back in March, I had sent you a letter of concern because of a situation I had last fall. And I'd had a past client that had also shared their situation with me as well. And it really was it's not the requirements as much as it was the time frame involved. And from a real estate standpoint, once a property goes under contract, we're typically closing that within 30 to 45 days. And especially the last 2 years, real estate has been, it's just been an environment unlike any time before ever in history. I mean, it just is. And there have been a lot of complications with things, financing sometimes, whatever. But the particular one I had sent you the information about, the original permit had been filed September the 8th, and Darcy wasn't able to come until October the 12th. Mm-hmm. And when she emailed me that, I called them like, hey, Darcy, we got to do something. This doesn't work for loan approvals. Sometimes people are on a locked interest rate that's only good for 45 to 60 days. We're using up over a month right there, just waiting for them to be able to come. But Darcy was short-staffed. There was,
Yes,
I think
there's two of us by then.
she had lost one person and was down to just her and somebody that was new. And they were also dealing with all the COVID stuff and trying to get help in. And so we had a contractor on site when she came on the 12th so that the pit could be dug. We could see what the possibilities were as far as that goes. And then it took until the 23rd of November. So we started this September the 8th, and it took until the 23rd of November to get all of that finished and closed. And this was one of those properties that had some extra issues. Smaller lot, lots of outbuildings, a circle driveway. I mean, there were just a variety of things, required waivers. We had no problem with getting our waivers or anything. It's not a problem with the process. Not a problem with the requirements. It is a problem with the process and the scheduling. And it worries me greatly now that you're responsible for childcare stuff too, because I'm thinking, oh my God, we have a hard time getting her initially. And now she has a very serious responsibility otherwise as well. The people that lived on Monroe that shared their issues with me, they kind of had the same kind of a deal. They got an email October the 27th stating that Darcy wouldn't be able to come until December the 3rd. They're living in this home. Wastewater surfacing, and they said they were told that they had, there was a plat of some kind of a development or something that had to be done, and she couldn't come out until December the 3rd. But then they did receive an email later on towards the end of November, on the 18th of November, saying that she could come the 23rd. So she was able to move that up. So again, it's not necessarily the requirements. I think it is a process that has inherently gained some problems. I do think that the code needs to be reviewed. I read through the code on the county website because my situation that I was involved with ended up having to put in a system that was considered experimental. But I don't see anywhere that there's any details of what is considered experimental or for how long. That current system had been in use for 6 years. So what is it that makes that still experimental? That, I guess, things like that.
One question, like, do septic systems have to be reviewed in a transaction? Is that like?
It depends upon the lender. This was a VA loan.
Lender.
Right.
Right.
Because originally, the seller, we were going to escrow $25,000 to set aside so that work could be done. Because the buyer said, hey, I'm okay with it getting done, if we can go ahead and get closed. Because they had given notice on a rental, and when we found out their lender wouldn't go for that, it had to be done before we closed. They tried to go back to that landlord to do a month to month until we could get them in, and he refused to do that because his son was moving back home and he wanted that house for him. So it was just...
Is it a liability concern of the lender? Is that what they
It is. They don't want them to get in and then have to turn around and need to spend $20,000. And this system, because of the challenges in it, was a $21,000 system. Therein lies another problem, because not all sellers have that much equity in their home, and a lot of them don't have that much cash to just fork out in conjunction with a real estate transaction to pay for a new septic. And so then we see people running their gray water off to the back of their yard, or putting the hose in their tank to take any extra fluid off that they can because they know their laterals are failed. And I think that we create situations that we don't want and shouldn't be happening. And we've seen them.
Yes.
We've seen them. So, I think that there would be merit in bringing in somebody with an outside view possibly to look at our code. Why are we more restrictive in some areas? I can see some of that because we do have a variety of soils. But when I sell in Rice County and we have to do a septic inspection there, it's basically you have to dig down to the tank, they have to pump the tank, and the environmental health officer has to be there for that process. They probe the lateral field. If everything's okay, looks fine to them, they give it a pass and off they go. And so it just seems like maybe we're making it more complicated than it needs to be. I don't know. I understand the whole point of it. And as somebody who's lived in a house with a septic for all but 17 of my 60 years, I understand that. I get that. And it's important. But are we doing it in the best way that we can, is my question. So my thought was that I think we do need to, in some aspect, review it or have some outside view of that other than our own experience.
Good comments. Thank you. Ron, do you want to, were you done?
Yeah, if there's any questions,
Questions for Rocha so far?
Well, might be putting the health department on the spot, but Darcy, you just said that people don't have to wait very long, and she just said that they had to wait 45 days or how many days. I don't understand. If you're right, she's wrong, and if she's right, you're wrong. And so it seems like to me that there ought to be some process that she could have been taken care of. I don't know.
I can, you want me to answer that? Do you want me to go back up here and answer? Okay, sure. So, Marcia is correct. This file was also reviewed by County Administration, Health Department Administration, and Legal this specific file that she's referring to, because of the letter that was received, there was no doubt that we were 5 weeks out for scheduling initial appointments. When I inform administration routinely how far we out on somebody getting an appointment so that they understand. That same time frame of this, we had holidays and a subdivision that was being proposed. And when the county has it where a subdivision is being proposed, that environmental staff go out and evaluate the lots and make sure it's actually buildable. Like, can they actually get something on this? And we had booked that evaluation for a week to make sure that we do well assessment, wastewater assessment, low areas. So that was a delay. We got through that faster than we thought, and I started bringing people up in the schedule, and I worked it as fast as I could. But you have to understand, we can't have overtime. It's not in our budget.
Okay, that's enough of an answer. I understand.
What, doesn't the state review water and sewer for subdivisions?
No. They do not. Only if they're going to be on a public water supply and a public sewer system. These lots that we were looking at will be on individual systems, and the subdivision actually quite challenging with some low water areas. It took us a while to get through that. But once we got through that, and I had all hands on deck. I mean, I recruited some people even from administration to come out. So I understand, but yes, that file was reviewed by administration and legal, and there was delays, but it was staffing. We were just trying to do the best we can, and admin can speak on that file review if they would like as well.
Marcia, what is a reasonable turnaround time for a real estate transaction?
Well, generally, it's a 30 to 45-day process. Depends upon the loan kind, FHA or a VA.
But if they turned around a response in 4 weeks, that would be sufficient?
Well, not if it's the initial site visit, no. Because then you've just used up 28 of your 30 days.
So the site visit occurs, and then what? You find all kinds of problems.
Well, the site visit is the initial, the application is the initial step. That was filed online by the contractor. And then it was a little over a month before the site visit could be made. And that's really the important part, because that's what determines what your options are for where that septic can go. And then the pit is dug, and like I said, I usually try to have the contractor there at the same time so that that's not a second visit, or so that's crucial right there, because that determines what happens from that point on. And then depending on if the contractor can get the parts and the tank and the kinds of things they're going to use, then that takes up to another 2 weeks maybe, Ron? There it was a big family that was buying this home, and they wanted a larger tank than we could get.
Okay, but generally it sounds like the critical thing is to get the initial visit.
Site visit, and if we could at least do that within the first 2 weeks, that would be helpful.
Thanks.
You brought up another point. Darcy can help answer this.
Yes.
I was sat in on a discussion with this a long time ago, and you mentioned experimental.
Yes.
You mentioned experimental.
Yes.
And at that time, people were talking about, well, why is it experimental in Reno County when Sedgwick and Rice and everybody else or other counties are using it? Why are we still in the experimental stage? Maybe you've solved this, but can you help answer that?
Absolutely. So when newer systems are approved, they may be new to the county, and legal had helped in that time frames as well. So county legal has been involved in the wording on some of this as well. And the word is now unproven. It is not considered experimental. And so what happens is there might be a newer system, and it might just be new to Reno County, but it might have been proven very well or working in other parts of the state. Sedgwick, McPherson, Miami County, Johnson. So their soils are a little bit different than ours. What we also have seen in the past when we've put in systems is that we fight sand intrusion and soil intrusion, and it took us about 10 years before it was discovered. And so we want to make sure that these newer systems can tolerate some of the shifting of the soils and some of these other methods. And so legal has helped me with that, and it's considered just unproven, and there's a letter that says it's unproven. We know it's worked in other counties. We just don't know how it's really going to work here in some of our soils. And if it doesn't work, then you're just going to have to put in something that's more proven. But we issue permits for them frequently.
Over what time period? Is it a real delay
What do you
to
mean?
issue that experimental
No,
use?
no.
Okay, thank you.
A couple days. It's a typical one. We just have to educate the property owner, and that's required by legal because the county, that's what legal wanted, and that's what we've been doing.
So is it our expertise that's determining whether technology works or not? Like we're using it, like the county is making a determination on whether a certain piece of technology
So on
is effective.
Right. On aerobic tanks, we've had in a policy since 2005 on an aerobic tank, and not all aerobic tanks are the same. KDHE does not have standards on aerobic tanks. So our policy is similar to what's in Sedgwick County. You need to have an NSF approved tank, and we want to also see nitrate data. And nitrate data is important. We talked about that. Like we're trying to get effluent out at a drinking water quality standard. So we have that policy. We've had it since 2005. It's been evaluated by an engineer.
My question was...
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Like, it makes sense to me if there's objective criteria, like you were talking about, some sort of output or whatever, and if the design can certify that these criteria are met, then you can approve it, which sounds different than unproven.
Correct.
So we're objectively reviewing these based on criteria.
Yes.
It's not like, well, you haven't, it's like proving a negative is really hard to do. Like, we're not requiring that.
Right.
We're just saying, as long as these objective criteria are met with new technology, it'll get approved.
Yes, and it's unproven. We don't know how it's really going to perform.
But if the effluent's coming out satisfactorily,
But if what? Can you say that
if the
again?
effluent is coming out satisfactorily from that system, then it shouldn't make much difference what kind of soil it is.
If the soil will tolerate it, it's going to influence the loading rate of the soil, the square footage. Right, because if you think a tighter soil, it'd be a bigger lateral field.
But
Are we speaking different things here? I'm wondering. I'm thinking.
Because to me, when you say unproven, like it has to, you can prove me wrong, but you guys aren't engineers, right?
No.
You can't look at something and say, well, that's not going to work.
Right.
Like you can't. Like it seems unfair to say, well, it's not proven that it works. If they say, well, if it meets the objective criteria.
Right, so there has to be like lateral fields. We have some newer types of lateral fields that have been approved, and basically we go through, we have some questions that we have. We have like a checklist sheet that we use to go through that. And we want to know like where they've been used in what other counties in Kansas, so I can call other counties and say, how's this working for you guys? Just trying to do some of that exploration on that. We dive into their calculations of math. Does it actually meet the state code?
That doesn't make any sense to me. Why are we checking engineers' math? Like,
I don't know.
I didn't say it engineers math. I would not check. I don't mean that. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes these designs that are proposed don't meet the state regulations. Like they don't meet the minimum square foot requirements. They like to cut down their systems and chop them down rather tiny. So, and in that circumstance, they have to meet the state code. Like everybody has to meet the state code no matter what.
But there's an objective list of criteria.
Right,
And you give that to the contractor.
right. That come out of the group of meetings with the contractors, yes,
And they certify it meets the list.
The engineer or their representative does, and it meets it. I don't know if I'm quite following you for sure, but
Well, like to me, like, you know, this laptop has like 5 certifications on the back of it, right? And it says it's, you know, FCC's approved
Right.
it and so forth. And so if a septic system has gone through an engineered design process to do a certain thing, and the engineer certifies that it will do this,
right?
we don't go and like test against the engineer's.
I don't test his system. I don't
Do we
know.
allow it then?
Excuse me?
Do we allow it?
Yeah, if it meets the criteria, that's why I was bringing it up about.
Engineer's criteria
Yeah.
that Daniel was talking about.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to tell you. Are you talking about aerobic tanks?
No, I just, like, do we have an objective list? Like, you can take it and like, okay, here's the list, here's my specs, do they meet? Like, that's simple to me. Like, this is the spec, and then the tank or the system is rated for this. Do they meet or exceed those specs?
Right, so after the contractors' meetings, there has been a list made for that.
So there's a list, it's objective.
If I'm following you here, Daniel, I'm not quite for sure.
Well, like a system has performance metrics or things that it has to do, right? I don't know what those are.
It has to meet the effluent
Minimum
disbursement out of that.
requirements.
That would be for aerobic tanks.
Okay, let's use that.
Okay,
So you got a list, right?
right,
You can give that to an applicant,
And
and they can go and say, okay, the tank, we go to the website, the tank has this performance metrics, and we match them up, and then like, okay, they exceed all of that, and then you're like, okay.
Right, yeah, if it meets the enhanced treatment policy and the nutrient reduction policy, yes.
But it's objective. It's like black and white.
Yes, I don't have any influence on that. I didn't make the policy, if that's what you're alluding to. I don't understand.
Darcy, so on those unproven systems, we're giving permits to install them, right? And then and then down the line, it's whether or not they meet the tests in the future. That's the kind of the question mark. Like, it's whether or not they're going to last.
Of course, we're public health. We're going to think ahead like that. I mean, that's what we do.
But how do like that's an engineer's determination.
What I understood it was we're letting people install them based on that they're supposed to work. And then,
Right.
and then the unproven element is whether or not, I guess the proof is whether or not it will continue to work for how long. So if you're a homeowner that chooses to install that system, the risk is that maybe it won't continue to maintain those standards, or maybe if it turns out later that it didn't work as intended, then you would be in violation of the code.
I mean, that makes sense, but how do you, as a non-engineer, make the determination how long a system's going to last?
So, consulting with an engineer, we used to consult with BG. Sid Arpin was our wastewater engineer, routinely consulted with him
But like
on these systems.
Patrick, can't we rely on a manufacturer's warranty and certification? Like, that's where it stops? Like, stop digging?
Well, I think my understanding is that that's kind of what we're doing. We are letting the homeowner is allowed to install those, and the unproven element is just saying, hey, if it turns out when you do, say you do a mortgage inspection down the line, and this system is not working as we expected it, as you expected it to, that's kind of the unproven
That's the
element.
same thing for
Same
any
for anybody.
system, right?
Yeah.
Any system, if it fails, you got to
Yeah.
fix it.
I don't disagree with that, yeah.
So,
Whether it's experimental or not, right?
yeah, I just think it should be objective, and like we should not be making determinations on how long something should last if the manufacturer warranties it as such. Like that doesn't.
If it's created by a manufacturer. Because sometimes I have people that want to propose their own very special ideas.
Yeah, I get that.
That's different.
But
Thank you, because
So,
I understand, and
told-
I agree with you, like manufacturers, absolutely, but I run into people who like to do their own little design thing that's way off of anything that we've seen before.
we're not.
Okay, I just want to make sure, yeah, okay.
So, Ron, did you have a couple comments you wanted to make?
Mr. Chairman, I've only got about 10 or 15 more minutes.
Oh, I didn't realize it was 12:30.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vincent, but I'm going to have to leave here in about 10 or 15
Ron
minutes.
Vincent, Carl Vincent Service, 901 East 95th. I'm not near well as prepared as they are. This just came up and didn't know what was all going to be brought about. There is, a lot of logic. You go back to the map that we had of the sensitive areas and stuff. I mean, if you follow that, we're right along the Arkansas River, the Cow Creek. I mean, they're all what we call unconfined aquifers, shallow water. Anytime you see a sand pit, you're probably in one of them situations because it's unconfined. There's nothing above it to keep that. So and in them areas, obviously, need to be protected. Our code, is 3 acres. Well, okay, I got a situation. There's a house on 3 acres up on the top of a sand hill, perfect conditions, everything's fine. Apartment on 2.9 acres. A regular septic system would be the nearest neighbor's quarter mile away.
Have you applied for a waiver on that?
No. But this is just in the works. But the point is, it's under 3 acres, so it's going to have enhanced.
Is that unusual for, is Sedgwick County 3 acres?
Not so much that. They're more on the sensitive, the shallow groundwater. That's very important. You get shallow groundwater or an unconfined aquifer. That's important, but not so much the size. Let's say not so much the size of the lot, the sensitivity of the lot. To impact our groundwater. That's where we should be. The code. The code does allow for that, but the code says that enhanced treatment has to meet two of so many. It has to reduce nitrogen and BOD and total dissolved solids. And all these ATUs do that. I mean, they got NSF 40, which means they bring the BOD and total dissolved solids down to below 40. I mean, they all do that. But with our enhanced treatment policy, that policy, not a code, it's a policy added on, that restricts a lot of these units to come in.
So there's a specific criteria
In the code.
Mm-hmm. that kind of reduces what you can use.
Right.
From a list of, are they septic tanks?
No, they're aerobic treatment units, or you're inducing air into them to enhance the quality of the treatment. Yeah.
ATUs?
Aerobic treatment unit. Basically, is
that what you normally put in?
They're the most economical that we have right now to use for what we call enhanced treatment.
So is one of your points, you have products that you think would work in the county, but they're not allowed?
Yeah, it limits the amount of products coming to the county because of this policy, enhanced treatment policy.
What's the particular rule that's...
To get down to 10 milligrams per liter for nitrogen. I mean, that's drinking water quality, sure. Then people can get down to it, but it's expensive. I mean, that's just the way of life with treating wastewater.
The counter argument is, well, that might end up in drinking water.
Right.
Yeah. What's the state's level?
That for drinking water quality?
No, for the 10 milliliter or whatever.
Oh, I don't think they have a.
That's nitrogen drinking water, isn't it?
Oh, in the drinking water, yeah. For drinking water quality, yeah, it's 10. It's
The
10.
state doesn't even track that.
I'll listen to the tape.
It's 10.
Yeah.
So,
You're talking about a flood level coming out.
Right.
yeah.
That's coming out of the tank, right?
Yeah. The septic tank is determined to be about 40 milligrams per
Right.
liter.
40 instead of 10
It's a septic tank. It's just without aerobic treatment.
milligrams per liter.
And that's
not
the
aerobic
toxic
treatments. Most of the aerobic treatments also have an NSF standard that reduces it, that they're required to reduce it by half. So that'd be 20, but we're 10. See, so I mean that's a qualification that
What does Sedgwick County require?
Oh, they have a lot more approved systems than we do. I mean, I don't think
Do they require 10?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't believe they do.
Right, they also have an additional BOD requirement as well. So that's even more stricter.
Oxygen event.
Yes, they have an even more restrictive, and their enhanced treatment policy is much more restrictor than ours. We're pretty lenient as far as enhanced treatment is in this county, and if you compare it to this one and Saline County, I just looked at their systems, and they're even more stringent. We are a little bit more particular on what leaves the tank, the effluent that comes out, but there are other policies, and McPherson is looking at doing this as well, but it's more stricter in Saline and Sedgwick as far as what can be installed, restrictive covenants that they apply to, that they impose on the property owners. Reno County does not do any of that. We just get a little bit more stringent on quality of nitrates, and reasonably why. I've educated you on why it's so important to get those nitrates down.
And the argument is, well, we have sandier soil.
Sandier soils, and it goes through much faster.
But, I mean, is that a scientific argument? I understand, like, generally speaking, like, you've got sand, and so, okay, it's going to go.
Yes, it is.
Filter down
It just
quicker.
goes right through.
But, like, still, like, okay, we picked 10.
We didn't pick 10, Daniel. That's a drinking water quality standard. The policy has been challenged multiple times, and it has been reviewed by an engineer, and it has been reviewed by the state. And for our area, they felt that we should be even stricter than we are.
Stricter than the drinking water standard?
Yes,
Why?
because of our sandy soils.
But if you can drink it, what?
I'm just saying, I'm just telling you what the engineer said, and I'm not going to argue with an engineer or the state on this.
It doesn't make any sense.
Well, and is it ever tested? I mean, is that effluent ever tested for that level of 10?
But the manufacturer says it'll do it. We're not going to argue with that and go test them.
Okay.
So, like, Ron, just, you got your 5 minutes here. Is there any other points you want to, just...
I think the biggest point is that there's, the code is 19 years old. There's been lots of changes, just like anything else. Biggest point is that part of the code, is not being enforced anyway. I'm not saying because of staff. I'm saying because it's impossible. The biggest point is that I think the code needs to be reviewed and redone. We could go back to state minimum requirements, which I feel is strenuous enough. We could get rid of some of these waiver processes that takes some time, because we're twice as our setbacks are usually twice as much as the state requirements. So the code's out. I mean, we go for 19 years. I mean, don't you think we should take a look at it and see if we can make it easier for everybody involved to follow this code? I'm sure in 19 years there's been a lot of changes in the world, hasn't there? I mean, we're not doing the same thing we did 19 years ago.
That's the point about reviewing.
That's where I think we ought to start. I mean, we got all sorts of points here that they brought up, but I mean, at the end of the day, that the starting point would be the code.
Yep. That makes sense. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
So, Ron, what do you think we should do here? Like, I don't think it's a bad comment to say, like, well, it's been 2 decades. Why don't we kick off another committee and ask them to look at it again?
I wrote down here outside. I don't want to spend for consultants. I just have trouble spending for consultants, okay? But maybe we could enter into a little more conversation with the health department about reviewing the codes and reviewing potential for having someone outside come in and look. I think that's where I'd rather have the conversation go. at this point is to have some conversation with the health department and the environmental selection on what we look at. I do think definitely that for the most part, I have a little trouble understanding that our soils are so much different than other counties. I just really have that from looking at all soil maps of other counties. I just don't believe that argument that ours are so much different than other counties, because you've got shale in McPherson, you've got heavy soils in McPherson, you've got some sandy soils in McPherson, and I could do that on any county around us, okay? So I have a little trouble with that, but I would like to have some further conversation with regard to looking at our codes and to have that conversation with the health department. That's where I would be at. Daniel?
Well, to me, if other counties are using this 40 number,
40 milligrams.
yeah, and we're using
nitrogen.
10 because of the soil. Like, given we study every location's soil, it would make more sense to go to the more strict level when you have a particular soil that requires that. Like, just to bluntly say, well, we're going to 10 across the board. To your point, there's a lot of different soil types in Reno County. Just because we have some more susceptible soil doesn't mean the entire county is that way. So
I've done everything from sugar sand to joint clay, and I don't know whether anybody knows what joint clay is besides me, but there's other names for it, but I won't say what that is.
So you wouldn't want to get like an industry, realtors, engineers, you wouldn't want to get them together to have a conversation about this.
I
mean, that's where the policy came from the last two times there was a committee that was...
Yeah, I would like to have some type of conversation, Daniel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, why don't I take it back with Randy, and maybe we can come bring you guys a recommendation.
Yeah. I think that would work
to talk through.
We can talk, yeah.
How does that sound to you? I really think we need to look at that standards being higher than ADHE.
Can I have Darcy, I just wanted to show something, just a disclaimer, that's all.
Disclaimer, okay.
I just want to let you know that when the code is reviewed, it does have to go to the state. The state has to approve it too. So just keep that in mind as a process. Okay, I just want to make sure
you guys
that you know
remember
that's a
that.
process.
Okay.
Yeah.
It'll be not a timely process. Is
Yeah.
that what you're telling me?
Yes.
Okay, well, apologize to Commissioner Sellers for running long. Apparently he had lunch already planned. Thank you to you all for being here. Thank you for the Marcia and Ron for your time, staying here late. Appreciate that. And I think we made some good progress on the conversation. So unless there's anything else,
No, I thank Darcy for giving us a very good overview.
thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So I'll adjourn the meeting.
And Megan for sitting through it all.
Right.